Built in the 1930s, under the steel rule of Joseph Stalin, the small Polikarpov I-16 was a revolutionary monoplane with one of the most influential designs in history. But despite playing a crucial role in several conflicts of the 20th century, its story has been largely forgotten. The humble little donkey was a tough warplane that saw combat for the first time in the Spanish Civil War. And by the time the Nazis struck in the summer of 1941, the Soviet aircraft was ready to meet the legendary Messerchmidts face to face. When the Luftwaffe invaded Soviet territory, the I-16s bravely took to the skies to defend the motherland. But as they ran out of ammunition, the pilots had to pull off a potentially lethal feat that would become an emblem of Soviet bravery. Trusting their stout and seemingly unassuming warplanes, the pilots took a deep breath and boldly sprinted towards the enemy, prepared for an all-out collision, which most of them survived thanks to the aircraft's sturdy airframe. The I-16's innovative traits would not only immortalize the aircraft itself, but also Soviet aeronautical developments as a whole. As the first palpable demonstration of Soviet competence and talent, the I-16 succeeded in bringing Soviet aerial design to the foreground, a true aviation revolution. Impossible expectations. Nikolai Nikolaevich Polikarpov stood out among the aeronautical designers of the early days of the Soviet Union. By the late 1920s, he'd created several influential designs and even succeeded aviation pioneer Igor Sikorsky, but his life would take an unexpected turn under the rule of Premier Joseph Stalin. In 1927, Stalin ordered a powerful fighter for the Air Force. At the time, the Soviets were looked down upon as technologically inferior, and their engineers often relied on copying foreign models. But the new fighter would be entirely designed and built in Russia. After 2 years, Polikarpov failed to deliver a concept that met the revolutionary goals the military demanded. Consequently, he was imprisoned, along with 450 other designers and engineers, including Dmitry Grigorovich, the creator of the flying boats that served the Tsar's Navy in World War I. From their new home at the State Aircraft Factory No. 39, Polikarpov's team was coerced into continuing the development and production of the fighter that would eventually become the I-5. In 1931, Polikarpov and several others were finally released, and soon the newly freed creator found the inspiration for a small but highly innovative aircraft. At the vanguard. Work on the I-16 fighter, or Ishak, meaning donkey, began in 1932 at the Central Aero and Hydrodynamic Institute. Rather than merely upgrading old designs, the developers went back to the drawing board and started with a blank page. As a result, a bizarre aircraft emerged, but as odd-looking as it was, it featured concepts that would influence aviation design for years. The I-16's fuselage was conceived as sturdy for combat performance, but however squat and stubby, the picturesque monoplane was the first in the world to be equipped with retractable landing gear, a cantilever wing, and a variable pitch propeller, as well as an enclosed cockpit. Many countries eliminated wire bracing and struts in stages, but the USSR was already ahead of the curve as early as the 1930s. These characteristics were groundbreaking at the time, but would eventually find their way into new, now standard concepts. Its airframe consisted of a barrel-like wooden monocoque fuselage and chrome steel wings with duralumin ribs, which were all covered in fabric. Plus, the wing's central section was integrated into the fuselage and provided with split flaps. In addition, the retractable landing gear was manually controlled through a cable connecting the pilot to the wheel wells at the center. In case of emergency, the pilot had a cable cutter to extend the undercarriage. Furthermore, the fighter was among the first to be mass-produced, thanks to its uncomplicated layout and compact size. Production of large amounts was simultaneously accessible, speedy, and straightforward. However, the massive undertaking could also be attributed to the 350,000 people working 3 shifts around the clock to produce 7,000 examples. Airworthy. Prototype TSKB-12, as it was called by the Central Design Bureau, showed a peculiar designation on its side. The letters VT, standing for Vnitrenaya Tagurma, or internal prison, could be seen inside a red star, indicating that the fighter was built under oppressive circumstances. The so-called Little Donkey flew for the first time on December 31st, 1933. The aircraft quickly proved to be ahead of any fighter design at the time, with outstanding maneuverability, firepower, rate of climb, and overall solid, hard-working performance, hence its moniker. The aircraft was powered by a modest 450-horsepower M22 radial engine, and it was famous for its signature sound coming through 9 separate exhausts of its 9-cylinder engine. Although it was relatively underpowered, the stubby fighter still achieved an impressive speed of 376 kilometers per hour. The I-16 was mounted with 2 brand-new 7.62mm SHKAS machine guns, outboarded the landing gear attach points, and had twice the firepower of the standard PB-1 machine guns. Moreover, the pilot was protected by armor, which was a luxury for the time. The unique aircraft was put into mass production right away, along with the I-15 biplane fighter. However, as the battlefield demanded ever more powerful aircraft, the I-16 received numerous upgrades, including more potent engines and bigger guns. These upgraded models would go on to serve all around the world. A rat, a fly. The Little Donkey first saw combat in the Spanish Civil War. In truth, had it not been for the outbreak of the war in 1936, the overlooked fighter might have faded into obscurity. Even though it is not among the best remembered aircraft of the decade, the rugged machine was highly qualified for combat at the time. The civil uprising in Spain drew support from all corners of the world. While the German and Italian fascist governments supported the nationalist rebels, the Soviet Union was the principal patron of the Republican government. Of the 1,409 aircraft the USSR sent to Spain, 475 were I-16s. The Little Donkey soon proved its impressive capabilities in the Spanish skies, much to the surprise of an enemy that underestimated the tiny fighter. In fact, the enemy called it rata, or rat, while the operators on the Republican side knew it as mosca, meaning fly. By then, the fighter was fitted with a more potent 730-horsepower M25 engine, effectively becoming the most powerful aircraft weapon in frontline service from any nation. The Little Donkey was also dispatched to the Far East to help the Chinese forces against the Japanese army. And thousands more engaged the Luftwaffe in the European theater, proving more than capable of facing the German Heinkel HE-51 fighter and the Arado AR-68. However, they were soon overpowered by the Messerschmitt Bf-109Bs. With the knowledge gained in Spain, the I-16 was subsequently equipped with 2 additional machine guns in the upper fuselage, synchronized to fire through the propeller. Also, the engine was upgraded to the M25V with 750 horsepower. These models became known as the Type 10s. By the spring of 1937, the remaining Moscas were assigned to Fighter Group 31, the most successful among Soviet-equipped units, and when the Type 10s met the Messerschmitt Bf-109Bs, they proved to have a better rate of turn and climb, in addition to heavier firepower. It was now a level playing field, and the outcome of every confrontation between the 2 rival fighters became largely dependent on the pilot's skill and prowess. The Taran. After the outbreak of World War II, the Little Donkey was becoming obsolete, especially against the Messerschmitt Bf-109. Nevertheless, by June of 1941, when the Nazis launched the invasion of the Soviet Union, the I-16s remained the most important Soviet fighters in action, and the pilots would make the most of them. At 4:25 a.m. on the first day of the invasion, Lieutenant Ivan Ivanov crashed his stout I-16 into the tail of an enemy Heinkel HE-111. The pilot did not survive, but he was posthumously awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. At least 9 other ramming attacks took place that day. The Taran, as the maneuver was known in Russian, became a common tactic by I-16 pilots who ran out of ammunition, resorting to ramming. Notably, the fighter's sturdy hull provided an ideal shield to execute the collision. However, it differed from kamikaze attacks in that it was not suicidal per se. Many Soviet pilots survived, with roughly a third landing safely and another third bailing out. Countless enemy aircraft were brought down in this manner. The first and least dangerous approach consisted of hitting the enemy with the actual fighter, such as with a wingtip or another part, but many pilots preferred to saw into the control surfaces of fleeing bombers using the propeller. The most precarious assault was a last resort direct attack, especially when they were outnumbered. If the pilot was skilled enough, it was possible to survive the all-out collision. However, if Luftwaffe pilots tried to outmaneuver the little donkey in a dogfight, they were usually surprised to realize that the Soviet pilots would swiftly get the upper hand. Still, the I-16 was defenseless when confronted with climbing or diving attacks. Legacy. The chunky aircraft soon fell far behind in the technology race, and when the E and F models of its nemesis, the Messerschmitt Bf-109, were introduced, the Soviet fighter was irremediably overmatched. But although the Soviet aircraft was deemed obsolete, it kept being used in combat. Moreover, experienced pilots resisted the change to more modern fighters, perhaps because of the inherent toughness of the I-16's airframe, which usually allowed them to return home unscathed. Thus, the model enjoyed a long service history, and over 8,600 examples were built. One of the most unique and distinctive aircraft ever produced, the little donkey left a notorious legacy, but quickly fell out of public awareness. To this day, it remains in relative anonymity compared to other famous pieces of aeronautical engineering from Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to all our Dark Documentaries channels for more military-inspired stories. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and leave us a comment below. Also, don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified of our newest content. Stay tuned.